Hey, everybody, it's Manfred, and you're listening to two of my favorites, Graham and Chris, out of left field right now.
Hey, guys, Graham and Chris back with you again, out of left field, coming to you on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. A jam-packed show for you this week. A ton of stuff to get to. A heavier show than we normally do, a lot of kind of heavy-hitting topics. So let's go ahead and put the ball in play, Chris, as we're going to try and keep this one under an hour as we did last week. It seems that everyone is kind of enjoying not having to hear me ramble on for hours and hours. I know you are. So obviously we know there has been a lot of international turmoil in the last year or so, particularly in Venezuela. And I don't know if you remember, but I think it was the first time we had Atlanta Braves play-by-play voice Chip Carey on. He was talking about a sit-down he did with center fielder Ender Inciarte of Atlanta, who is from Venezuela, and his family was saying, please keep speaking out, even if we are persecuted, because the world needs to know about our plight and what's happening over here. And he took a very hard stance of becoming that voice. So because of sanctions that have been placed, and you are way more kind of in the news know of this than I am, you can probably explain it a bit more. But there have been economic sanctions placed on Venezuela by the U.S. government. And how does that affect baseball? Well, Major League Baseball has decided to preclude players, major and minor league players, from participating in the Venezuelan Winter League. This is going to be a huge story, maybe bigger than you really understand, when Winter League Baseball is something that we don't see really in the U.S. and don't pay attention to that much.
Right. And so essentially what's going on here is that the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, began his second 5-year term in office recently, and in January, and it just caused a huge protest, national protests, and more than 12 or 13 countries have declared his reelection illegal, that it was an abuse of power, that it was rigged, that between the abuses of power and the human rights violations going on in Venezuela, that most countries in the Western Hemisphere have decided to recognize the opposition leader, Juan Guaido, as the country's rightful president. And the Trump administration recently decided to put a full economic embargo sanction against Venezuela, in an attempt to sort of force their hand into changing from the top down the power structure there. And a lot of people don't know this, but we do actually import oil from Venezuela.
And I want to try and put this in context. I'm not playing down to anybody, but if you are younger and listening to this and don't quite understand the kind of the big picture ramifications of what's happening here, this would be, and correct me if I'm kind of going beyond here, but this would be the same as when we heard people saying that, regardless, and we're not playing politics here, but when the whole President Trump isn't my president, was going around, and still goes around, but this would be the world saying that because of all the accusations that have been made, they don't recognize Donald Trump as president, and they recognize his opposition as the rightful president of the United States at that time. And this is a huge international undertaking and choice that other countries are making that is obviously prompting the U.S. action here. If I'm kind of making the proper correlation here.
Right, and you are, and essentially, and believe it or not, this is not an unprecedented thing in the world. This has happened before. We've seen it before. But when Venezuela went into its huge economic downturn, and Maduro sort of took power, things against American Major League Baseball players and their families have gotten bad. Like you mentioned with Ender Inciarte and his family saying, "I don't care. They don't care if they're going to be persecuted or not. Just please continue to speak out." I mean, it's not just Ender Inciarte. Wilson Ramos was kidnapped in front of his house in 2011. He spent 2 days in captivity. Major League players play winter ball in Venezuela. They have for a long time. It's a way to stay in shape. It's a way to stay ready to play Major League Baseball when spring comes back around. And we say this is a big deal, not just because it's financially and economically a big deal for Venezuela, but also this is going to affect the performance of Major League Baseball players. And in my opinion, that's secondary to everything else that's going on. But for the purposes of this show, it's a big deal.
And that's, I think you articulate it the exact way that it should be, in that we aren't trying to understate what is happening there. But again, we are not a news show. We are entertainment show. We are here for baseball, and this does affect the lives of those minor and major league players. Very, very rarely do we think, Chris, that a guy who has finally made his debut in the show goes to winter ball, but a lot of guys do. I mean, you think that guys like Yadier Molina goes back home to, I believe, the DR, and will manage a team. Alex Cora was doing that as well in, I believe, in Puerto Rico before he got the call by the Boston Red Sox. I mean, a lot of these players and former players and front office executives who still have a rooted interest in baseball in their home country go back and are heavily involved. I think Moises Alou is an owner of of one of the Winter League teams, and forgive me, I don't know which league that would be in, but this is big. This could have, and it's a very, it seems over the top, but this could have significant career ramifications to certain players, a lot of whom we haven't heard of, but to those players who are hurt, who are trying to rehab, trying to get some more reps, or to show that, hey, I can still be productive against very good baseball in the offseason. Give me a chance in spring training. Put me on your 40-man in AAA. Give me a chance to win a roster spot. This could be something that this could really hurt players with that attempt.
Well, and not just players in the major leagues and minor leagues. This affects Venezuelan players as well. It's similar to the sanction placed against Cuba, not allowing Cuban players to be signed directly into the major leagues. This will affect Venezuelan players in the same way. So it hurts Venezuela, but not the Venezuelan government. See what I mean? It doesn't matter what your politics are. The President of the United States put an executive order into place. Major League Baseball's responsibility is to follow that executive order. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what you think about the president or politics in America. That's the fact. And while that is the fact, it behooves us to discuss the many ways in which these sanctions are going to hurt both the U.S., really just Major League Baseball, but also Venezuela and its people. And it's not just baseball that it's going to hurt, but for the purposes of this show, when interviewing people in Venezuela, a resident of Venezuela named Jose Martinez, 39 years old, he's an accountant, gave an interview to the Washington Post that said, the sanctions are not going to topple the government. It's just we, the people, that suffer. Every kid here dreams of reaching the major leagues. A prohibition on Venezuela means we're finished, end quote. And that's hard. It's hard to hear. It really is.
And you're looking at guys, like you mentioned, guys like Ronald Acuna Jr., Jose Altuve, Wilson Contreras, Gleyber Torres. I mean, Venezuela, and I believe you mentioned this, and forgive me as I was reading through a quote here that Jeff Passan posted from ESPN that was given from Major League Baseball. but I know you mentioned this to me pre-show that other than the DR, I believe Venezuela has the largest number of active major league players in the league at
Right.
this.
The other than the Dominican Republic, the second most players from a foreign country come from Venezuela. Over 400 players in the major and minor league systems, and it's not like they aren't names that you know, right? We're talking about Gerardo Parra, Anibal Sanchez, Adrian Sanchez, Asdrubal Cabrera, Wilson Ramos, Ender Enciarte. These are names of baseball players that we know. And while this doesn't prevent them from going home in the offseason, it does prevent them from going home and playing baseball.
Right. And we'll close a segment with this. And this quote is from Major League Baseball. Quote, Major League Baseball has been in contact with the relevant government agencies regarding the executive order issued by President Trump on Venezuela. Major League Baseball will fully adhere to the policies implemented by our government. With respect to the Venezuela Winter League, Major League Baseball will suspend its involvement in that league until it receives direction from the relevant agencies that participation by affiliated players is consistent with the executive order. So, obviously, there is.
I do have one quick side note also. Since the economic downturn and things have gotten really bad in Venezuela in the last 7-8 years, there's been a huge increase in human trafficking. Mostly people desperate to get out of Venezuela being trafficked out of the country into the Caribbean. My question for you is this: are we going to see a rise of young people trying to get out of this country to go to Dominican Republic or somewhere else where there aren't sanctions against ball players to play baseball, and unfortunately ending up in a trafficking situation? You think this is...
And that has been reported as a major concern for players and league sources alike, that this could become a very a la Cuba type of situation where people are losing their lives or are deeply indebted to the kind of people you don't want to be indebted to because of choices that they make to try and further their career or provide a life for their family.
Right.
So I think it's a very good question. Moving on, something a little bit more lighthearted should bring a little bit of debate between you and I, but a kind of an enjoyable debate, and that is that recently, within the last couple of weeks, both Alex Cora of the Red Sox and Aaron Boone of the New York Yankees, both of their respective skippers, have found something the bitter rivals agree on. Yes, grab your seat. Something they actually agree on, and that is that at the least they would like to see Major League Baseball entertain the idea of a mercy rule, not requiring, I should say that's the wrong word, but not having to play a full slate of 9 innings when the game is fully out of hand and having to run the risk of either burning through your bullpen or putting a position player in who is either going to get himself hurt when there's no real advantage to be gained when doing that, where at that point you're basically going ahead and waving the white flag.
This is such an interesting topic for me. We have said time and time again, I think, on this show, between the two of us, we've probably said it 1,000 times, that you and I are sort of baseball purists. And we have this belief and this idea that baseball as it has been played is baseball as it should be played. And, there's a lot of debate over that too. And baseball as it has been played in what era, baseball as it existed when. But some things, I think, are timeless. And it really feels like playing 9 innings when you are able to is one of those timeless things. It makes sense in high school, right? It makes sense in high school because you got kids who they can't, when you're losing 15-2, right, in the 5th inning, it makes sense to call it. Those kids aren't coming back from that. Demoralizing, the danger of injury in high school is much higher right? These kids aren't used to possibly doing a week full of practice at third base and then having to come in to pitch because there's nobody else to pitch. Not that I'm saying that a Major League Baseball player is any more ready to do so, but they're playing at a higher level and they're conditioned at a higher level.
Well,
So
at the same time, you see, remember Rafael Furcal, the shortstop for the Braves in the early 2000s, was throwing 100 miles an hour from shortstop.
right.
That was just how he threw. These kids, I think for the most part, as a coach, you can certainly speak to this better than I feel like the kids, and even when I played Little League years and years ago, I tried to throw harder when I was as a pitcher than I would as a normal fielder.
Right, because
like those kids are going to try to overdo it because in their mind, velocity equals success.
well, and their mind also thinks that the harder I move my arm, the faster the ball goes, not understanding that it's the whole combined movement on the mound that increases velocity, not necessarily just arm speed. So they're trying to muscle the ball down, and they hurt themselves, and it happens. That being said, I honestly don't know how I feel about this. Now, the purist in me says, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's no possible way I could ever entertain the idea of a mercy rule in baseball. But the purist in me has also seen a game where one team is getting blown out badly and people leave. I get it. You say, oh, well, they're paying for this product. You got to give them all 9 innings. No. At 15-0 in the 7th inning, the stands are empty or emptying anyway.
And I love the irony in this because, and you actually have mentioned this on the show, and if you haven't caught the show before, it's your first time, we welcome you here on Out of Left Field with the Grueling Truth Sports Network. You can always check all of our previous shows on Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook, at OO Left Field on Twitter as well. But you mentioned this to me, and we had a pretty good knockdown dragout. The baseball purist who says that a mercy rule isn't part of the game is the same guy who said after 13 innings of a tie ball game, kill it.
Right.
So I find the irony, and I don't say that to laugh at you, but it shows really how you and I are baseball purists. But again, the game that we remember is not the way the game is being played now. And that sentiment plays very, very heavily, or weighs very heavily on the way that we see the game going forward. And I think the good thing here is that at some point you have to be willing to adapt and saying, I like baseball the way the way it used to be, but it's not going back there right now. Maybe we get the cycle the same way that fashion and everything else has a 20 or 25 year kind of cyclical run. But right now we're on the dark side of the moon. So how do we go ahead and adapt to make it enjoyable and consumable? And I think a mercy rule might be a decent answer to entertain, or at least investigate how it could be utilized.
And it has to be done right. It can't be like high school, right? No fourth of it. The game has to be official, first of all.
Right.
But assuming that the game is official, there are all other kinds of 7 innings. There are other kinds of reasons for stoppage after a game has become official that end a game early. It's not unprecedented.
Right.
If a game gets called for rain in the 6th inning, that game is over.
And I want to ask you that, and I'll piggyback off this, and this is a huge rabbit hole that we're going to save for the offseason when we need some good stuff to go ahead and entertain.
We need something to talk about.
Right. But I'm going to ask you this, and just a brief answer. But, at the same time as, we talk about, and I'm starting to lose my train of thought, but, we kind of talk about these mercy rules. Keep in mind, in minor league baseball, when a doubleheader has to happen, especially in low A, they play 2 7-inning games. They don't play 2 9s.
Right.
Would you be willing to see something like that on doubleheaders? Or even, I think at least a 7-inning mark is the premier mark for the cutoff, consideration.
I mean, I think so. I think 7 innings is the minimum, right?
Right.
I think 7 innings is the minimum because let's face it, and I think it has to be high. It can't be 10. I think it has to be 12 or more runs because the 13-run inning doesn't happen very often. But we've seen 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And if you can score 6 or 7 in the 7th and 5 or 6 in the 8th, you're right back on track. But I feel like if it's something that's going to be done, it has to be done in such a way that it's almost never used because, let's face it, Major League Baseball games don't often get that out of hand anyway.
True.
So,
and especially if you're going to implement the reliever rule that requires you to have a reliever in for a minimum of 3 batters, that should open up a bit of the planning and the scheming to go ahead and maybe set you up for the beginning of a decent inning. So I agree with you. I think it needs to be to a point that is considered well out of hand, and that's it.
and I have a question for you. I mean, this is just kind of a sidebar, but if the Yankees had been blowing out instead of getting blown out, do you think this would have come up?
I think so because at the end of the day, if you're up big, I mean, maybe you're not running through your pitchers the same way, but it's still a game like, okay, you know what? The game's over. They're not really trying. We're going through the motions to go ahead and get the game over with. I think you'd be okay with calling it on either side of it, to be honest with you. Yeah.
So while we were talking about this the other day, this idea of mercy rules and possible alternatives, and we've been talking about the 18-inning game, and while we feel like it doesn't happen very often, I swear to God the Giants play 3 or 4 of them a year, and they're hard to watch. I had an idea, and I was wondering what you might think of it. I know I didn't prep you for this, and I see the look on your face saying you didn't prep me for this.
I'm down to go for it. What you got?
What if Major League Baseball allowed for a team to have an expanded roster, say 35 guys at all times. However, only 25 of them were eligible to play in games that lasted less than 14 innings.
I think there's too many not salary cap ramifications, but if that's the case, you're having to pay guys the league minimum base to start off with. And when you have guys who are getting into that veteran, side of their couple of years in the league, and then they're required to be making, a couple of $1 million, I think that begins to shoo guys out of the league faster. I'm not as big of a fan of it as you might have thought.
Well, see, there would be considerations for that in my system as well. Right? Time on an expanded roster on the 10-man. Time on that 10-man roster, if you don't play, it doesn't count towards service time. Only playing time counts towards service time. And these would be AAA guys. AAA guys who otherwise aren't going to get reps in the majors anyway either. So you bring those guys up, you let them play you let them put on a big league uniform. If we go over 14 innings or you get into this situation where there's a 10 or 12 run deficit, then you let those guys play.
So you're taking away reps from AAA guys who are trying to find their way into the big leagues, have them ride the pine pony in the hopes that maybe we find our way into an extra inning game where maybe you want to put me in and maybe I do one thing good or maybe I do one thing horrifically bad that makes you go, you know what, maybe we should move on from this guy. Honestly, the way that you explained that, I dislike it even more.
Okay, fair enough.
I get the idea, but that's where I think the expanded roster kind of gets dirty is how are you going to fill it? And that's where I think the mercy rule kind of begins to make sense where, yeah, you can expand it by by 2 or 3 players, but anything beyond that just gets really convoluted, I think. Speaking of changes, though, in Major League Baseball, stop me if you've heard this one before. The Atlantic League.
Oh, I've heard this one before.
Okay, so moving on. No. So the strike zone in the Atlantic League is been something we have talked about here plenty of times, maybe to the point of nauseating for some of you. But a report came out the other day. I want to say it was earlier this week that that Commissioner Rob Manfred and Joe Torre, who is the vice president of operations for baseball, are apparently on a massively different. They're in two different books, not on different pages. They are in two different sets of words. All right, one's a hardbound, leather-bound book in a apartment full of rich mahogany, and one is a paper-bound book in the smut section of your local grocery store. Whoever is in that, you can choose who's where. But apparently, there is a disagreement between these two, and Commissioner Manfred seems to believe that the robotic umpire system is ready for deployment in Major League Baseball. And right now, where we sit, and Chris, from what we have heard about the way that this system is being received and is being utilized and the massive gaps that exist, it sure as hell is not ready for full Major League Baseball rollout, in my opinion.
I think that's an understatement. Not ready for Major League Baseball rollout. I don't even think that this thing was ready for the Atlantic League. Given all the problems that it's been having, and, it depends on who you talk to, really, about all the problems that it's been having. Of course, anybody affiliated with umpires and or players and or coaches think it's the worst thing in the world. Anyone affiliated with the guy who sits in the commissioner's chair, and really just the guy who sits in the commissioner's chair, he thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread. But it's the fans that are really split over this. It seems a no-brainer. The coaches don't want it. The players don't want it. The umpires don't want it. The president of baseball operations doesn't want it. Half the fans want it. I mean, who are we kowtowing to here? You still have to be able to play the game. And from what we've seen, when you look at the robotic strike zone or the electronic strike zone or whatever it is you want to call it, we're going to call it TrackMan because that's what they're using in the Atlantic League. When you look at TrackMan, it's pretty clear early on that it lacks the ability to adjust up and down in the strike zone based on the position of the hitter in real time, something a human can do. It has a vertical blind spot. And those are not my words. Those are words that have been used over and over and over again on another sports network called Close Call Sports. And it's repetitive. There is a vertical blind spot. For example, during the All-Star game, we see a neck-high strike called because it couldn't adjust. It tried to adjust to a crouch. When a guy squared the bunt, it tried to adjust to a crouch, called a strike what would have been way over the batter's head in the crouch, and neck-high in the upright position, and the umpire refused to overrule the call. There is some reticence of umpires in the Atlantic League right now to overrule these calls on anything that's not egregious. Wild pitch in the dirt, because, by the way, this electronic strike zone, if a ball hits the dirt 5 feet in front of home plate,
if the catcher pulls an A.J. Pierzynski and frames the bouncer,
right? If it hits
you're going to get it.
They're going to get the call, and it's not a matter of fair or unfair, right? It's a matter of, is it a strike or isn't it? And whether or not a pitch is a strike should be the same for both teams all the time. Now, you can put the ball in the same place twice, but against two different batters, it could be, or it could be a strike. It could not be a strike. It depends on the batter.
Strike to Jose Altuve is not going to be a strike to Aaron Judge will not necessarily be a strike to Jose Altuve.
Right, unless it's right down the pipe.
Right.
Unless it's coming down Main Street, there's just nothing you can do about that. That's the nature of the strike zone, and it has to be that way. The strike zone has to change. And there's so much.
At the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, we're not trying to rehash the same things we've said. The concern is, why in the hell are these two guys so far apart? When Joe Torre said not 2 months ago, I don't think it's ready yet. It might be a couple of years before the technology is really there. Right now, our umpires are better. What is Rob Manfred reading? Or what is Joe Torre reading? But how are they so far off that one says our umpires are better than the machines, they're not ready, and in the same season the commissioner goes, I think we're ready to implement. I could see it happening in the next year or so.
It makes you wonder about the kind of people that each of these men have around them, right? Sounds like Joe Torre is talking to people in the Atlantic League, players, coaches, things like that. And Rob Manfred is listening to yes men. That's really what it sounds like.
Which, I certainly hope it's not the case, because I've been quite impressed with Rob Manfred in the way that, for the most part, he has handled his time in the commissionership. Regardless of what we say, what we think, he's actually done a pretty good job at being willing to see what's happening in baseball and try and find ways to be proactive in updating the game. And I hate to use the word change. It sounds like I'm playing semantics here, but he's trying to keep the fabric of the game, I think, for the most part, intact. But he wants to allow the game to update with the times. Basically, of keeping your favorite sweater or jacket, but adding a patch to it, something to kind of go ahead and make sure that you're not going to go ahead and see it rip apart because you've been wearing it for 30 years.
Well, what he's trying to do, and I think what he's doing pretty well, is he's trying to make the game relevant to a generation of people who are so tied in to instant gratification for everything that there's not a lot of us left that can sit and watch a 9-inning game and be satisfied with that. And if it takes 3 hours, it takes 3 hours. If it takes 4 hours, it takes 5 hours, or whatever. But the way the world works now is, as soon as anything happens anywhere in the world, we get a notification about it. We know what's going on. Everything is instant. It's fast. It's forward moving, and baseball has to jump on that bandwagon a little bit. Not at the detriment of the game, but it has to get faster. And I think he's done a really good job trying to weave in and out of the ideas that he's had to do that without tearing apart that original fabric.
Right. And this is a very difficult slope, because you're hearing hitters. Remember, Ben Zobrist last year gets ejected for telling Phil Cuzzy, "This is why we want robots. You're gone." And I'm not at all going to sit here and vehemently deny that umpires probably want to go ahead and stick it up a player's fourth point of contact. Airborne reference, in case you don't know, fourth part of your body to hit the ground on a jump. But hey, you wanted it? Here it is. Well, that's egregious. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have called it. You don't want me doing that. But at the end of the day, you have Madison Bumgarner saying that it's a stupid zone, doesn't want to have it, implemented. Clayton Kershaw has a dislike for it. I asked AJ Pierzynski, who is absolutely known for arguing with umpires, getting ejected. He thinks it's the dumbest thing. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I hope we never see it, which really surprised me from him. He said, no, that's stupid. He said, umpires work hard at their job. I can disagree with them, but I'd rather have them than a machine. And I respect that. And I get we want this level, we want this idea of perfection, but you know, I've been there. I've been there as an umpire in a close game. And you know what? When it's a no-hitter, and I remember Dale Scott telling me this, that he had a no-hitter going, and he called a ball four with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, or top of the ninth. It must have been top of the ninth. A ball four with, I think, with 2 outs top of the ninth. He said, and thank God that ball four was obviously a ball. But on one of those close ones, right, the Philip Umber perfect game, the check swing, I'm not sure that was a check swing, but you don't want to be the guy that jacks it up. It was just after the Jim Joyce incident anyway. But, when a pitcher is on and is painting it, when Matt Cain threw his perfect game, if he had made a pitch an inch off the plate, an inch and a half off the plate, you think he's not going to get that pitch with a perfect game on the line? Yeah, it's human error. It's also one of those benefit of the doubt pitches that at 95 miles an hour and it's a split second, man, it's good. He's been hitting it all night. Posey was there. Ring him up. The human element does play a very important part in the game, but so does the advance of technology. There needs to be a balance here, and I don't think we have it yet. And until we find out what that balance is, I don't think the zone can work with the effect that Manfred wants it to be.
Right. And one of the major issues that I've seen with it, just in looking at what's been going on in the Atlantic League, looking at what some of these pitches look like that are being called balls and called strikes that people in the Atlantic League are getting ejected over, by the way, despite robot umpires. One of the issues I see is
or in spite,
right, or in spite of, but one of the things that I've seen is that when they show the graphic, when they put the graphic up to show this is where the ball went through the zone or didn't go through the zone, and you see a third or more of that ball, the on the graphic,
right,
in the zone, right, in the zone, and it's called a ball. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the rule say that if any part of the ball crosses through any part of the strike zone, it should be called a strike?
Sounds correct to me, sir.
Well, when the graphic shows the ball and it's half in and half out and it's called a ball by the machine on a pretty regular basis, they either need to be able to fix their graphics or there's something wrong with the machine.
Right. And that's just, it is not pitchless yet, if you will. And that's okay. It really, it's okay. It doesn't have to be yet. This is a 3-year deal for a reason, Mr. Commissioner. Don't force your hand. Allow it to go through the proper vetting that you want it to go through. If it's ready, put it in. If you think it's going to make baseball better, and if you think that's the case, guess what? 3-year trial in Major League Baseball. And take an actual give a damn poll from your players, from baseball personnel, from the fans if you even give a hoot about them. But figure out if what we've tried to implement is actually wanted once they see it working. It might be, and if it is, cool. If it's not, okay.
And let's not forget,
show that you care.
Let's not forget that if you do this now, if you force it now, and you lose it in the CBA,
it's irrevocable.
You're done.
Yeah.
Take your time. Let things get settled between the players' union and the league. Do this in such a way that the players' union can't just veto it for good.
And you know what? You have the possibility right now, and I get it is not the sexy topic, but you have the possibility to stand behind your umpires as well. Go to the table in your negotiations. If players say, this zone sucks, we don't want it, to hell with it, okay. And then when you begin to have arguments on balls and strikes repetitively, stand behind your umpiring staff. The players spoke at the negotiating table They said we don't want it. You obliged them. You didn't force the issue. Stand behind the damn umpires.
And please, for God's sake, make major leagues numbers the public numbers. Make their zone numbers, their plate numbers, the public numbers. 97% accuracy is what the evaluation tool says.
What you see. You go to MLB.com/scores and you see the live play-by-play graphics. Those graphics get changed. You don't ever hear that. You just assume that was an egregious miss and he's gone, and it was right. All right, moving on from that, I had my rant. We both had, I think, some good comments at that point. I think we go ahead and say what needs to be said. So let's go ahead. We'll get into top 5, bottom 3, an enjoyable tail end topic here with top 5 and bottom 3.
Not quite tail end.
Yeah. What's that?
Not quite tail end. We still have some end of season awards to predict.
Oh, correct. You're right. Yes, I didn't have that one. You are correct, sir. I forgot I was running that off of the same page here. So, all right. So let's go ahead and touch real fast. We've been through this plenty. Top 5, bottom 3 again. Top 5 teams of the week. All right. We know who our division leaders are. We'll touch on those. Yankees, Twins, Astros still leading their divisions. The Rays are 8 games back in the East, but a half game up in the wild card. Pretty much now, for the most part, our division races are done except for the Central. The Indians are still trying to go ahead and claw their way. Only 2.5 games separate the Indians and the Twinks. That is the last race to look for in the American League and the National League. 5.5 games now separate the Braves and the Nationals. This should be all but clinched. Nationals do have the lead, I believe, in the wild card. Good for them. The Mets, the Mets are 6 games over 500. They were kind of my sleeper team. They're 1 game better than the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies are the East now, a team with 4 teams over 500. The most enjoyable race to watch, again, the Central. It's deja vu all over again. The Cardinals, Cubs, and the Brewers, 3.5 games separate all 3. And the Dodgers have all but wrapped up, as they are the only team in the National League West who are over 500. Chris, my top 5, I did go a little bit different, and I kind of think that it is part of what makes it fun. The Atlanta Braves are my top team. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They've won 6 straight, 78-52. Hard not to go ahead and put them up there. Now, again, the plus 73 run differential, it does concern me as far as the postseason goes. Can they outscore some of the hotter hitting teams? But they're up there. I put the Nationals as well. They've won 4 straight. They're also 8-2. They have come from seemingly nowhere, like a bat out of hell, to make their stake firmly into the postseason right now. I'm very impressed. The Tampa Bay Rays, a team who 6-4 have won 3 straight in their last 10. They're 76-54. Again, they are holding solid to a wild card spot. St. Louis Cardinals have won 2 straight, but they're 7-3. That has thrust them back on top in the Central. And finally, the Oakland Athletics, who are also 8-2 in their last 10, won 3 straight. And again, with that heavy win streak down the stretch, also puts them in line to make a heavy attack at the wild card. They are a half game behind the Tampa Bay Rays for wild card spot number 2.
Well, it is going to be a little bit more interesting this week. I guess we're not going to be pat like we typically are. But I also don't have 2 of the 3 best teams in the league on my top 5, simply because they aren't playing well this week. Not that doesn't put them into my bottom 3, but it takes them off my top 5. I have the Braves, just like you did, 8-2.
The Yanks were 5-5 this week. I mean, they're playing well, but they're not going to be a team that the Yanks were 4-6 rather,
and the Dodgers 6-4.
Yeah, there's not teams that we're gonna put on happy blast this week.
Right, but the Atlanta Braves, who are 8-2 in their last 10 and have won 8 in a row, are at the top of my list. They're just flat out playing good baseball. They're firmly in control of that division right now, 6 games up on the Washington Nationals, who, by the way, are also 8-2 in their last 10 and have won 5 in a row and come in at number 2 on my top 5. I think they're playing good ball. I think I like to see – what's that? We're Pat there, yes.
You and I are Pat on 1 and 2. Okay.
Yeah. I think they're playing amazing baseball, and I realize that, they pretty much decided that division.
Scherzer's not even there right now. That's the crazy part of this.
I realize this division's pretty much decided, but you look at all the numbers, and right now Washington's the better team, not including their actual record. 100 plus 107 run differential compared to plus 78, and winning games at every bit the same clip as the Braves. At number 3, I have the Houston Astros. They're 7-3 in their last 10, and they've won 4 in a row, and they have firmly put anyone else out of contention in that American League West. They're 9.5 games up on the Oakland A's, who are sniffing a wild card right now. They're half a game back, but not quite there yet. Despite them being 7-3 in their last 10, they've lost 2 in a row. So they missed my top 5 this week. Rounding it out for me is the Minnesota Twins. I feel like the Minnesota Twins are the only team that could have done what we said wasn't going to happen, and that is knock off who we just thought were going to be the incumbents based on a bad division. They're playing good baseball. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. They're at a plus 151 run differential at this point. And spoiler alert, their manager is doing well. Let's just leave it there. You want to go bottom 3? Okay, here's mine. At the top of my bottom 3, I have the Toronto Blue Jays. We're 2-8 in their last 10 this past week. They lost today. They're 23.5 games back. They've only managed 53 wins, and I think realistically, you and I expected better than this of them.
Yeah.
Not only are they playing poorly now, they have been playing poorly and far below what our expectations were. Next, I have the Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Tigers are just the worst team in baseball, bar none. And they're playing like it. They're 3-7 in the last 10. They've lost 2 in a row. They're almost on pace to match their 2003 season, which is the worst season they had. It was one of the 10 worst seasons in modern baseball history. And then my third one is Miami. And I wanted to throw an National League team in there, but the Miami Marlins deserve it at this point. 3-7 in their last 10. They did manage to win a game, but still.
I am with you on Detroit and Toronto. My third team is one that I know is going to probably surprise you, and you're going to be like, what the hell, look. But I am basing this on the week, but also what that week means big picture for that team. My last team are the Cleveland Indians. 4-6 this week, lost 1 today. They are 3.5 games out of the divisional lead. This kind of poor play down the stretch could find them completely out of the wild card race if they don't tighten everything up. Because of what it means to the Tribe down the stretch, I put them at my bottom 3 because they should be playing with a lot more aggression behind this team as they look to go ahead and make a push into
especially looking behind them and seeing how well the A's are playing. Right. They should be worried right now.
True. All right, so you teased it. All right, so we had 2 more topics here. As we near the 50-minute mark of the podcast, we're going to table this. We want you guys to think about this as well. And if you're willing, please drop us a comment on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook. Are the Baltimore Orioles of 2019 the worst team in Major League history? Our answer,
modern Major League history.
Modern Major League history. That is the key there. And our answers, with a bit of context, might find you surprised. We will table that for next week because we want to, as we are near the end, really the last show of August, leaves us about 4 weeks until the end of the 2019 season. Then it's time to start talking awards. And you mentioned it, you teased it. We are talking Manager of the Year today. So, Chris Furry, American League Manager of the Year. I think you already kind of hedged your bet of where you might be going, but is it the manager of the Twinks?
Yeah, Rocco Baldelli. That's my guy.
Okay.
That's my guy. I mean, we didn't give the Twins an opportunity to do this. We said at the beginning of the year that the Twins were not going to be able to put together the kind of season that put them in the playoffs. Looks like we were wrong. If anything, if it holds out as is now, being 3.5 games up in that division and playing the kind of baseball that they're playing, it looks like we're going to have to eat our words on that one.
I'm going to go with Aaron Boone strictly because of injuries, right? We still thought the Red Sox were going to be the better team. If the Rays were a little bit closer than 8.5 games out, I would throw my hat completely at Kevin Cash again. I think he deserved it last year, and Bob Melvin got it. But Aaron Boone, 84-47, the second best record in Major League Baseball, the third best record rather in Major League Baseball. They trail the Houston Astros by a half a game. But they've played amazingly well. He has galvanized this team. At this point, I think it's Savage of the Year, and I really am sad that I missed. I had that entire line planned when I started thinking about it, and I totally missed my work on Savage of the Year. But yeah, I mean, Aaron Boone, with all the injuries that ball club has been dealt, and as well as they have played, and the way that he has really found his way into the hearts of that ball club and that fan base. I mean, he is the manager that Joe Girardi was, and I think more. Girardi was fiery, would back up his guys, but didn't have the personal empathy and communicative ability that I think Boone does, which is why Cashman wanted to hire him. So I think that where we're looking, even though it was expected for him to do this with the injuries, makes it even that much more impressive.
I can't disagree. You make a good argument. You make a good argument.
And the National League, I'll let you go.
Brian Snitker.
Okay. So
that's my guy.
The incumbent wins.
Yes, and here's why. Despite a good showing last year, despite earning that title, you and I both said that a lot of things have to go right and a lot of things have to be done right for the Braves to maintain this sort of winning style culture to get into the playoffs this year, to go deep into the playoffs this year. And we've talked about all year about, some teams are just running away with the league right now, and the Dodgers, obviously the best team in baseball. But keep in mind that the only other team in the National League with 80+ wins is the Atlanta Braves. Now, don't get me wrong. Could you say Dave Roberts? Absolutely, you could. But I won't, simply because it's expected of that team to be where they are right now.
Then let me play devil's advocate here, because I think you play it the right way. But I just want to open your mind to the quizzical, kind of dog head tilt that every now and again I say that one thing that I actually get from you when it's not I'm an idiot, but that's an interesting point. 71-58, 73-57. Not impressive numbers, but we had no idea at the beginning of the year the Nationals could do what they're doing. Dave Martinez has to at least...
You thought they did. You thought they were going to win that division.
I did with what they had, but then the way they came out was they're done. And now they're 4 games up in the wild card. So the two that I will go ahead and at least give the mention to, because I agree, I think it will become a pretty obvious vote of either Snitker or Dave Roberts. But Davey Martinez, pains me to say, thought for damn sure he was going to be fired already. But Dave Martinez and Mike Shildt of the St. Louis Cardinals are two names who have done an extraordinary amount, at least so far, with the teams they have. Now, granted, Shildt would have to win the division to even be considered in the conversation. And the Nationals would have to really run away with wild card number 1 to be considered in the conversation, especially now they have a plus 107 run differential after they struggled so mightily to begin the year. That being said, because of how bad they looked and the ability they still had to turn it around, I will go ahead and say I do believe that Brian Snitker will win that division in a division that had the Mets, who were, again, 67 and 63, the Philadelphia Phillies, who everybody thought was going to be better than they showed up to be, and the Nationals, who have made a very, very big run. I think the parity in the Central hurts Mike Shilt's candidacy just a little bit. And like you said, Dave Roberts was expected. That team was expected to run away. You and I have both been saying this has to be the Dodgers' year. It's got to be World Series championship or bust.
You can't go twice and then with no ring to show for it and then show up a third time and keep your job. You cannot.
Correct. So, he should be managing for his job. He's managing very well. This team is very good. He's got some concerns of Kenley Jansen. Good. Time to go ahead and really manage. That's okay. I don't say that in any negative aspect. So I will agree with you. I will go Brian Snitker as well, just because I think it's the accurate pick. But I feel that I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention Dave Martinez and Mike Shildt as names you have to at least tip your cap to. And if they do have their ball clubs finished in the top of the wild card and top of the National League Central, respectively, you have to go ahead and at least give them a consideration. Remove the record. Look at what they did to get their teams to where they did, at least for a minute, and pay them the respect that they should be due. All right, guys. So again, that is it. We have Brian Snitker on both sides. In the American League, Chris has Rocco Baldelli as the manager of the year from the Minnesota Twins. I will pick Aaron Boone of the New York Yankees. Sorry, Dad. As I always say, when they have to come up, it's a requirement now. Next week, we will start talking about, we're going to go Cy Young next week. Might as well have a little bit of fun.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So we'll Cy Young next week. And, of course, our topic on the Baltimore Orioles. Guys, another week. We are that much closer. We are definitely around third and headed for home. And I don't see a home plate umpire calling time within the next 5 weeks. Yes, I made Morales. I'm sorry. He made the right call. We can discuss that next week, too. There is a reason behind what happened.
That was the closest to a mercy rule as the MLB is going to get.
There you go. So, guys, thanks, as always, for hanging out with us. It's been a blast. I know I'm loving it. I am behind the camera and in front of the camera and the microphone an immense amount this time of year now with high school football, youth football, volleyball. Hell, I broadcasted bowling this week, which was actually a flippin' blast. Had a ton of fun doing it. It's not your quintessential your broadcast. Please, if you're interested, at least hearing a little bit of what we're doing and taking a look, 321 Sportscast is who I work with here in Florida. I have an absolute blast doing it. It's awesome being on the call. But nothing beats being up here with you guys every week, Chris, hanging out with you and doing what we love to do, which is just talk baseball. I don't get a lot of baseball love in Florida, so damn it, we're going to make sure that we get our fix in every week. So for all of us here at the Grueling Truth Sports Network and out of left field. That's Chris. I'm Graham. So long, folks. Catch you back here next week on the show, Out of Left Field, the Growing Truth Sports Network. See you next week.